think what you're asking me is if I believe any of this stuff will really help your daughter.
No, I don't have any children, Ellen Burstyn. I was asking you where the toilet was. 90 years old. I found out Blumhouse was doing Exorcist 2023. I got kinda excited, like dozens of other people did. And then I found out David Gordon Green was directing, and all the air rushed right out of my little balloon. Probably because the greasy taste of Halloween Ends was still coating the roof of my mouth at the time. I wasn't expecting Exorcist 2023 to be amazing, but I also wasn't expecting it to turn out to be one of the worst movies I'd seen. Now, I know as well as everybody else does, movie production involves hundreds of people, but it is the director's sole responsibility to coordinate everybody else's efforts to ensure the movie we end up paying to see matches the director's creative vision. That is literally their job. When I watched Exorcist 2023, it made me angry. The movie wasn't scary, the story was shit, but I couldn't figure out why it was upsetting me so much. So I posted my spoiler-free review right here on YouTube, and despite keeping the review vague and non-committal and essentially spoiler-free, David Gordon Green's little gang of administrators decided to tell YouTube to give them any money I made off of the review. And that changed everything. So I watched the movie again, a few times, very closely, and it turns out my initial assessment was completely wrong. This movie is very scary, but for all the wrong reasons. Now, normally, as per the way I do things here with this channel, I'd be reviewing Exorcist 2023 all by itself. But for today's review, I am going to be contrasting this sequel with the original Exorcist from 1973. And I'm doing this specifically to demonstrate every major point in this movie either makes no sense, it's been stolen directly from 1973's The Exorcist, or it's pushing some kind of bullshit Hollywood politics. And in this movie fan's humble opinion, that makes director David Gordon Green an overpaid creative fraud.
Let's go. Are you kidding me? I made the frickin' music myself. You know what? Fine. But just remember, you started this.
If you've ever wanted to love a movie before you've even seen it, you'll understand how disappointed I was to find out the bullshit in Exorcist Believer starts immediately. If you're a fan of the original movie, you already know 1973's The Exorcist opens famously with a shot of two dogs fighting in an exotic foreign location. And this was the director William Friedkin showing us Father Merrin, the actual exorcist, has experience with ancient demonic forces. The opening's also full of symbolic foreshadowing and cultural contexts and thematic depth and, most relevant to the dogs, atmospheric tension. And that's some of the subtle genius of Friedkin's opening, as taken directly from William Peter Blatty's novel. All these essential elements are conveyed in less than 10 minutes, and because Friedkin was an artist, like an actual filmmaker, he conveyed all this stuff with imagery and not dialogue. Unearthing that statue head fills the story world with tension that sticks around for the rest of the movie. And what exactly do dogs do in the presence of tension? Pretty freaking cool, right? Now, conversely, David Gordon Green, who I'm gonna call Greener from here on in for convenience sake, opened Exorcist 2023 with dogs fighting in an exotic foreign location because the original movie did it. That tells us one of two things. Either he wasn't aware of the depth of the original opening, or he was aware, but he isn't capable of conveying anything deep or complex through the medium of film. Next up, Greener uses Haiti's real-life earthquake from 2010 to create an absurd scenario when he traps Leslie Odom Jr.'s wife in the rubble. Odom Jr.'s character, Victor, is presented with a preposterous proposition when two doctors tell him to choose whether his wife or their unborn child is going to survive. Now, this is meant to be a fun YouTube video, so I'm not going to go super deep on this point, but imagine yourself in this exact situation right now. And think about what kind of a human being you would have to be in order to choose your unborn child over your life partner. Oh, as a side note, pay close attention to Leslie Odom Jr.'s character in this movie. Everybody's saying he did a fantastic job in the role, but his face never moves. 13 years later, and Victor's living with his daughter, Angela. And for reasons that won't make sense until the very end of this movie, we're meant to assume this means Victor chose his unborn child over his wife. After Angela's dropped off at school, we see Victor trying his hand at some boxing. And Greener's showing us this because Father Damien Karras was a former boxer in the original movie. And Karras' boxing skills material shows us he possesses physical and mental strength. We also find out he's struggling with internal conflict regarding his faith. That whole concept is perfectly encapsulated with this single image of him sparring alone as his own opponent. It also highlights the contrast between violence and compassion, which speaks directly to the complexities of a conflicted man of God who's still currently active within his church. Also, and most obviously, it prepares the audience for the physical and mental fight ahead of Father Damien Karras. Victor, on the other hand, is not a boxer. As far as I can tell, Greener just added this scene in to appease fans of the original because maybe he thinks we're slow. This scene also features Green's first open dig at Christianity when Victor scoffs at his neighbor's appalling invitation for him and his daughter to join them for pancake breakfast on Sunday in their church. What a cunt. Then, as per the trailers and all the marketing material, Angela and her friend Catherine head off into the forest to perform a ritual. And they're doing this so Angela can speak to the ghost of her dead mother, a woman she never even met. Fine. I have never been a 13-year-old motherless girl, so I will let the fact she's obsessed over somebody she's never met for 13 years slide. Famously, in the original movie, Linda Blair's Regan McNeil messed around a bit with a Ouija board, but its connection to the ensuing events is so intentionally ambiguous, it's kicked off 50 years worth of discussion around whether or not it triggered the possession. But Greener seems to have trouble thinking 5 minutes ahead, never mind 50 years, so his pair of girls get possessed because of a ritual. Now, of course, in terms of storytelling, this is a way more efficient approach, because in real-life terms, it means we don't have to waste our time discussing possibilities with our friends after the movie's over, because there's nothing worse than having to exchange ideas with your friends about a movie after the movie's done, right? The next night, Victor comes home to find his house is full of witch doctors. And after he's tossed everybody out, his neighbor suggests he's going to have to get comfortable outside his comfort zone in terms of his faith. On top of it being logically impossible to be comfortable outside your comfort zone, think about it. It's also the weirdest thing in the world to say to somebody whose daughter just went missing yesterday. It's like he's acting as if he already knows the girls are going to end up possessed. Are you okay, man? No, I'm not okay. My daughter's been missing for 24 hours. Oh my God, that's terrible. I have a friend that can get you a great discount on coffins. But as weird as this one seems, this setup actually pays off later on at the end, so we'll come back to this. Trust me. 3 days later, the girls are found in the back of a barn full of goats. Because, you know, goats. The devil. They're brought into the hospital, and Greener devotes nearly 5 straight minutes of runtime to close-up scenes of the girls being examined. And this part is extra fucked up. The hospital scenes in the original film played a huge role in grounding the story in realism and enhancing the tension and uncertainty. The medical procedures themselves were brutal, and that contrasted with Regan's gentle, innocent, childlike disposition, and that connected us to her character. In addition to connecting us to her character, which is what makes scary movies truly scary, the hospital scenes also transitioned us away from scientific possibilities and towards supernatural ones by process of elimination. You also have to factor in 1973, the audience wouldn't have known what's actually going on. But 50 years after the movie's release, even non-horror fans know that little girl in that movie was possessed. This movie's actual premise established the entire possession subgenre. As I've said before in previous reviews, every possession movie you have ever seen is imitating this movie. And if all that wasn't enough on its own, Greener declared this is a direct sequel. He told us ahead of time in the marketing and in the trailers, this movie featured 2 possessed girls. You won't see my serious face on this channel very often because I'm not a serious person, but for reference, it looks like this. And if you're wondering why I mentioned this, Greener's choice to copy the original hospital sequences creates a massive and really obvious redundancy. Because for all the reasons I've just outlined, there wouldn't be a single person in the audience for Exorcist 2023 that wasn't aware the girls were possessed. And if movies are meant to be for audiences, why did David Gordon Green spend 5 minutes showing 2 13-year-old girls being tested with rape kits? And on a lighter side note, for anyone suggesting possessing 2 girls instead of 1 is some kind of an original concept, give your head a shake. He did the exact same thing when he fucked up Halloween Ends, his previous movie, by having Corey Cunningham become Michael Myers' little killing buddy. Shockingly, the tests all come back negative and the girls go home. Angela gets annoyed with her dad for taking her dead mother's scarf from her earlier in the story because it was meant to connect her with her mother's spirit during that ritual they did in the forest. And this is another stupid concept written into the narrative to support another stupid Hollywood political point later on. Aren't modern horror movies amazing? Next morning, Victor does that thing people in movies do when they start a full-blown conversation with somebody that's at the other side of the house. It's cheap and easy writing. Every time you see somebody do this on TV or in a movie, it is guaranteed the person they're speaking to is going to be the opposite tone. And of course, when he gets there, she's wet the bed. And of course, she had to wet the bed because... And then Angela ends up back in the hospital after hilariously kicking the shit out of her dad for no apparent reason. And of course, when she gets there, she's cursing like a sailor because...
Fucking bastard!
And then we're subjected to Catherine and her horrible traditional Christian family together in church. And Greener throws this scene in, which I can't show you. Suffice it to say it's implying she's having a wee fiddle. And if you try suggesting Regan also played the fiddle in the original, I'll shut that down immediately by reminding you there wouldn't have been anything enjoyable in Regan's solo fiddle performance. Then Catherine does the scene from the trailer, and given Jason Blum gives his director's creative license to make all these movies their own, I mean, that's the actual Blumhouse selling point. It's kind of sad all Greener could come up with was having her shout the priest's words back at him over and over. I mean, lots of kids act like that nowadays anyway, and they're only possessed by staggering quantities of self-entitlement. After the little tantrum, the girls' parents chat outside, and Catherine's mother equates the girls being gone 3 days to Jesus visiting hell after his crucifixion. And what's most interesting about this little piece of writing, and if Greener wasn't just trying to think of spooky shit to say in his movie, he'd have realized the 3-day comparison means the mother's implying the girls are messiahs now. By his own fucking logic. Then back at the hospital, possessed Angela tells Ann Dowd's character the nun name she chose for herself when she almost became a nun. But she did not become a nun because she got preggers. And Angela also tells her she knows she terminated the pregnancy. So Ann Dowd goes straight to Victor's house and she gives him a book, and the book is A Guide to Exorcism by Chris MacNeil, mother of Regan MacNeil, the two main characters from the original Exorcist movie. As Victor's skimming through it, he comes across a passage about the words "help me" appearing across Regan's stomach while she's possessed. Even casual fans of the original movie know they kept this incident from Chris MacNeil to spare her feelings. Right on time at the halfway point in the movie, according to the scriptwriter's paint-by-numbers formula, Victor transitions from reactive to proactive and he seeks out Chris MacNeil to ask her about the book. On his way there, we're shown Chris MacNeil explaining she's not an exorcist in a television interview. Her dialogue also focuses on assuring the audience this isn't a Christian thing, it's more of a global phenomenon spanning all cultures. It's hurting my head. Greeners wrote this in to make sure any non-Christians in the audience wouldn't be offended by the fact the source material he's cherry-picking from was based on Roman Catholic priests saving the eternal soul of an innocent young girl. Now, without getting specific about anyone or anything, some of the non-Christian cultures he's so worried about offending are the same people who leave nasty letters on their neighbors' doors complaining about Halloween decorations. And of course, they are free to express their feelings. All I'm saying is, if they're in the theater in the first place, obviously they're aware of the original story and they are okay with it. And if they're not okay with it, they wouldn't be in the theater watching this piece of shit movie in the first place, would they? When Ann Dowd eventually decides it's time for her to speak to her priest, David Gordon Green copies Chris MacNeil during her first meeting with Father Damien Karras.
Somebody very close to me is probably possessed.
Someone I know is suffering and needs help.
Why? It's a single line of dialogue in a 3-second scene. After Victor arrives at Chris MacNeil, she explains why she... Sorry folks, we're about halfway through this and I'm really starting to struggle with constantly shouting at the coach from the sidelines. I think it's time for me to get in the game. After Victor arrived, Chris MacNeil explains why she believes she wasn't allowed into the exorcism. And if I was Victor in this scene, I'd have been all like,
Placebos are real. Power of suggestion is real. I think what you're asking me is, if I believe any of this stuff will really help your daughter.
No, I don't have any children, Ellen Burstyn. I was asking you where the toilet was. 90 years old. How about you start off telling me about...
I didn't actually witness it, the exorcism.
Of course. Everybody knows Chris McNeil didn't see it.
They wouldn't let me.
Aha! Let me guess. David Gordon Green made you the best-selling author of a book about exorcisms, and then halfway through production, somebody pointed out Chris McNeil didn't watch The Exorcism, and of course by then it was too late to rewrite the entire story, so he threw in this actual dialogue to cover everything up. Okay, I'll bite. To distract everyone from his obvious lack of research, why exactly were you kept out of The Exorcism according to David Gordon Green?
It's because I'm not a member of the damn patriarchy.
Listen, I know you're 90 years old. Your monologue in Requiem actually made me tear up, but shame on you, Ellen Burstyn, for pushing this moronic Hollywood horseshit. You deserve what happens to you at the end of this movie. And now seriously, where's the bathroom? Your egg salad was a bit funky.
So Victor takes the 90-year-old Chris McNeil to see Angela in the institution, and Chris McNeil's old actor's ego announces itself immediately.
She knows who I am.
No, Chris McNeil, I know who you are, and my friends know who you are, because we're old. Then they head to Catherine's house where they find her pathetic Christian father crumpled up on the ground all weak and useless. And again, this supports the movie's underlying themes as you will see towards the end. So 90-year-old Chris McNeil wanders up the stairs all by herself so she can hang out with a possessed young girl all by herself. And she finds Catherine all possessed and reading the Bible upside down. Where she finds Catherine all possessed and reading the Bible upside down. Sorry folks, that was worse than the barn full of goats. So she finds Catherine all possessed and reading the Bible upside down, so Chris McNeil's ego announces itself again.
And you know who I am.
And if I was possessed Catherine in this scene, I'd have been all like,
I know who you are. And you know who I am.
Oh my god, why are you assuming everybody knows who you are? Are you the president's great-grandmother or something?
I renounce you. I come here to return.
Listen, Missy, I might not be the smartest little possessed girl by Puzzozi, Zumba, but why did David Gordon Green have you rush straight up here to my bedroom to get all up in my possessed face, giving it all the priesty lingo, when you just literally told everybody in the last scene you leave the exorcism work to the professionals because you're not an exorcist? Why the fuck are you trying to exorcise me? You deserve what I'm about to do to you with that conveniently placed crucifix.
So after 18 months worth of hype and 50 years away from this role, Chris McNeil gets her eyes poked out with a crucifix. And rightly so, I'd say. And on her way to the hospital, she forms a psychic bond with the girls from the back of the ambulance. And if this sets off some kind of deja vu for you, as it did for me, you might be connecting it to Corey Cunningham's psychic connection with Michael Myers in Halloween Ends. Back at the church headquarters, I think, Ann Dowd and her priest petitioned the powers that be to sanction an exorcism for the girls. Victor pops in to visit Three Blind Mice McNeil in the hospital, and despite sustaining injuries that would probably have her 90-year-old self sedated for literally the rest of her life, Greener gets her pushing even more of his Tinseltown politics. And I will bet you lunch, those heavy bandages are there to hide the fact she can't keep her face straight. And after bragging about all the books she's read again, clearly having zero idea that last scene pretty much destroyed any street cred she would have built up with the elite exorcism crowd, is probably a thing. The world is a really weird place at the minute, and you know Hollywood. Anyways, she delivers part of this film's underlying philosophy directly now when she tells Victor the real power within a church is not the God, but the community that attends it. I am not a religious guy. None of this is offending me personally, but a lot of my friends and family are, and I respect them for it. It's one thing for David Green to be reminding everybody over and over this movie's nothing to do with Christianity, but suggesting church members come before the actual God they're there to worship personifies modern Hollywood better than I will ever be able to. Chris tells Victor the only way he's going to save the girls is to bring the community together. That suggests the dark forces responsible for possessing the girls and separating Chris McNeil from her eyes 30 seconds ago can be dismissed if everybody just has a positive mental attitude. No God required for this Exorcist sequel. So, in true Greener fashion, the diverse community bands together in the end. Victor locates the witch doctor who broke into his house earlier in the movie, and she tells him she gave up her oncology practice so she could save people with crushed seashells and roots from plants. Then Victor invites the entire community back to his house, where he's drilled 2 chairs directly into his hardwood floors. And considering Ann Dowds managed to bring $158,000 worth of medical equipment to the little party, maybe Victor could have asked her to bring 2 heavy chairs along with her as well. And with everybody pitching in to help now, the witch doctor prepares a lovely parsley and sage stuffing to help fight off the demons from hell. And if you boil that specific point all the way down to the bone, folks, which I never would have normally, but he started it. David Gordon Green's essentially saying a salad is more powerful than a Christian God. And the witch doctor tells everybody not to touch the girls, and if that sounds contradictory to the original story, it's because it is. But I'm sure you're not surprised to hear there's a reason for that too. The priest arrives, and despite Angela now looking exactly like one of the cavemen from Quest for Fire, he says the church has decided they only need a psychiatrist, because the church is bad and the diverse non-Christian community is good. And in the final showdown, a slutty nun and a hokey local pastor and a witch doctor and whoever else wanders in the front fucking door apparently, all gather around the girls and shout random things at them at the same time. And it's really super cringy to watch, but I can't look away because at the minute, this is my job. And this back and forth bullshit goes on for 10 minutes until the adults are told to choose which of the girls survives. And now that we've learned the girls possess superpowers, apparently, I suppose that means the community's positive mental attitudes weren't quite positive enough. Or maybe the witch doctor put too much sage into her fucking stuffing. Of course, this explains why Greener wrote that opening earthquake scene, because Victor's forced to choose whether or not his daughter lives. I'm sure Greener thought this was some kind of an amazing bookend, but even a third grader's level of scrutiny would reveal pretty quickly it's not. This setup is an obvious trick to get one of the parents punished for acting like God, and Victor's aware of that because the women shouted it at him several times. Now, of course, if anybody present would have known this beforehand, you would think it would have been Catherine's devout Christian family, wouldn't you? This is when the seemingly random comments and awkward setups all tie in together to show us this movie and David Gordon Green's true colors. When the priest puts his hands on the girls, Catherine kills him with her superpowers. In response to this jarring event, Victor puts his dead wife's scarf over Angela's shoulders and apologizes for taking it from her earlier on. And then Catherine's weak, pathetic, devout Christian father ignores the clear instructions from the women and chooses his daughter to survive. If you sift through all the extraneous bullshit of this bizarre ending, you will find a fairly clear message underneath it. Among other things, the original Exorcist was a thought-provoking, poignant examination of faith versus reason. And in this sequel, David Gordon Green kills the only ordained church member for touching a young person. And then he kills a young, devout, innocent Christian girl for the sins of her father. And finally, he has a faithless man exorcise a demon from his daughter simply by listening to her. Now contrast that with Catherine's devout Christian father, who ignored the female voices in the same scene to the detriment of his daughter's eternal soul. David Gordon Green is telling us in the audience, through this movie, Christianity has no power in the modern world, and men in this modern world will be redeemed if they listen to women. And if they don't, to summarize all this as I see it, David Gordon Green just used a much-loved, much-revered juggernaut of a horror movie's name to push his messages of anti-patriarchy and anti-Christianity. Not only are these the lowest hanging fruit in terms of modern-day movie themes, they also happen to be two of Hollywood's biggest current buzzwords. And that means, as far as I'm concerned, nothing in this movie was original or worth watching. Also, almost forgot, Linda Blair shows up in the dying seconds of the film, and as a devout fan of the original Exorcist movie, who gives a fuck?